Are live. 100 subscribers. Let me repeat. I have reached the milestone of 100 subscribers, and it is all thanks to you. It's thanks to any of you who've subscribed and are joining me along in this journey. If I was in a room with 100 people right now, that would be incredible. So thank you. As a special thank you, we're doing a special live stream today. We're going to see if I can do 100, let me repeat, 100 writing tips in under an hour. And that's in addition to the 2 writing sprints because I can't let myself get cold on our daily writing challenge. So, we're going to see how this works out. I'm super nervous, but I am so excited. So, we're going to get some writing advice and writing tips to help you become a better writer. All right. So I've done a couple things to keep this as organized as possible. So I'm going to hop right into it, where what we'll do is we'll start off with some writing tips. I will spread it out between a couple writing sprints, and we will see if I'm able to hit 100 in under an hour. Yes. So, if you have any writing tips, as you can see, here's the writing tips to help you. If you have any writing tips or any things that you think of as we're going through this stream, feel free to drop it in the comment and I will add that to my queue of writing tips to help us get to 100 together. All right. But I have 100 queued up. So let's get right into it. Now I need to get my camera. Perfect. All right, and we have that go. All right, so number 1, the scariest moment is always just before you start. One of our favorites, Stephen King. You know that feeling when you're just about to get started on a brand new story, a brand new novel, and you don't know, like, what's going to happen? Overcome the nerves, overcome the fear, because once you start writing it, you're going to have so much fun. But don't let the fear of writing stop you. Tip number 2, don't be afraid of what others may think of your writing. Sometimes fear can really hold us back from creating the stories that we want to tell, from writing the things that are within our heart. But when we're fearful of what others may think of our writing, then that stops us from being able to tell like the right story. Don't let that stop you. I guarantee you they're focused on whatever stories and whatever things they're trying to deal with. We are all on our own race. Don't compare to other writers. Tip number 3, the beginning is always today. This is a great lesson and from one of my favorite authors, Mary Shelley, Frankenstein. Sometimes we think, all right, we're going to start on that story tomorrow, next week, next month, but then we end up putting it off. Sometimes, like anything, like with our health, we just have to get started writing right now. Tip number 4, if you don't know where to start your next story, think about your favorite, and I mean your favorite show, book, movie, and use that as inspiration because you felt an emotional connection with that piece of work and you want to understand what was the emotional resonance that really helped you relate with that because that's then going to translate into the next story that you're going to tell. Hey, what's up, Vaughn? Welcome to the stream, my man. Thanks for the like. Definitely, if you have any tips that you've learned from your writing journey, feel free to throw them in the comments down below. If you want to help me reach 100. All right, and tip number 5: the secret of getting ahead is getting started. By our classic author Mark Twain. Sometimes when we're planning out all these long stories because we all have such phenomenal ideas. We want to tell our stories with the world. But if we never get started, we're never going to be able to tell those stories. So that's why the secret is just getting started right now. And tip number 6, want to learn more about writing? Now, this is one of my favorite reading material. So, reading source, go read Stephen King's On Writing. It's a great inspirational memoir. It's a cross between a memoir and, like, a writing tips, tricks, style, structure. We all know how many hundreds upon hundreds of novels Stephen King's done in his lifetime. It's because he started off consistently, and he just keeps coming out with more and more. If there's any author to, take some advice from, Stephen King is one of them. Check it out. Alright, and number 7, you can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. I always hear from new writers that they always say, "I don't feel very creative," or I always hear from people who don't even consider themselves writers. They're like, "I don't have any creativity in my body." I disagree. Every single person out there has creativity, including you. It comes down to what is stories that you resonate with and what are the stories that you want to tell. Just because you don't think it's not creative doesn't mean that you're not a creative individual. Whether even if you're interested in something like math, sciences, agriculture, something that doesn't feel very creative, there are stories that you have to tell, personal stories that are absolutely creative. And tip number 8, are you feeling uninspired? Are you dealing with writer's block, procrastination, or all of the above? Go listen to your favorite song and ask yourself, throw on the music, earpods, whatever you have, and ask yourself, what would this character or artist do in a crazy situation? This is an absolutely great opportunity for a free write if you're feeling like, oh, what should I write next? Then you can use that to start your next story. One of my favorite, an old song that I, was listening to, it was, uh, it was called, I think it was Bla Black Parade. It was way, way back in the day. It was, My Chemical Romance. Oh, it brings me back. It was a My Chemical Romance song. It gave me the idea for a character that was going to destroy the world. And then it started me off on my journey of creating this, like, weird post-apocalyptic fantasy sci-fi script, which actually came out a lot of fun, but it was inspired by that one song. And if you've ever, worked on any of your own stories, we all know the power of music. And tip number 9, the art of writing is the art of discovering what you believe. The stories that we tell are an extension of our beliefs and the messages that we want to convey to the world. So, whatever your next story is, or even if you look at your previous story, those are all parts of things that you want to share to the world. They are parts of your experience, and that's incredible. If you're ever struggling with, like, "All right, what type of story am I really trying to tell?" Think back to what is the message that you wanna tell, because that at heart is what should be reflected in all your characters, all the obstacles, and all the things in between. And, hey, what's up, dad? Thanks for the like, thanks for hopping into the stream because we're gonna go right on to number 10. Procrastination getting you down? What? You're right. We've never dealt with procrastination. What is that? Get out of here. Set a new notification on your phone for the next time that you have to write, but do it as a 5-minute notification, a 5-minute timer when you sit down and write. The goal is just to sit down and write. You want to start a new habit and make it as easy as possible. As easy. Once you've done that once, then you can repeat the process and then you can go, okay, let me set a notification for next week. And then I'll set 2 notifications. Can you commit to writing for 5 minutes? That's the goal. And regardless of if you come up with something amazing and you want to keep writing, or if you come up with a hot pile of garbage, the fact that you wrote is the success itself. And all right, so we're on through our first 10 tips so far. If you're just hopping into the live stream, feel free to post a comment down below. If you wanna share a writing tip or what's, like, some writing experience that you've learned, I have 100 tips queued up here. But if you wanna, uh, join me in the journey, throw one in, and I'll replace one of the writing tips that I'm going to share. Excellent. And, Jessica, thank you so much for the like. I appreciate you. And that means on to tip number 11. The first draft is just you telling yourself the story. Have you ever been working on that story, that next great novel, and you're like, "This story, this draft has so many problems. The characters suck, the dialogue sucks, the story sucks, but I still love it." It's because it's a rough draft. Give yourself a break. The fact that you put that onto paper is the success itself. And then the second, the third, and the fourth draft is your opportunity to refine the story, make it better, make it stronger, and really pack a punch. Tip number 12. Do you suck at getting yourself just to sit down and write? Go get one of your friends, get a family member, and have them be your accountability partner. Having an accountability partner as a writer makes all the difference. But make sure that you get somebody who's actually going to give you a tough time, let's put that mildly, who will give you a tough time if you don't sit down and write, because you both know that in the long term, like, that's your goal, but in the short term, it's hard. And then when they're struggling in life, now the tables turn and you get to be the accountability partner. And tip number 13, you don't start out writing good stuff. You start out writing crap and thinking it's good stuff, and then gradually get better at it. This is a great tip for any new and beginning writer out. Writing is practicing and writing more words and failing, making mistakes, learning from your mistakes, and writing stories that are amazing, and also writing stories that really struggle, because the journey is learning to write, rewrite, and improve. Tip number 14. Do you struggle with procrastination? Join a local writers group and procrastinate with other writers instead. Then at least if you're procrastinating with other writers, you'll feel a little less guilty about your overall procrastination. And what I found after being in multiple writers groups throughout the years is that when you're with other writers, sure, you'll talk about writing stuff, but you will also motivate each other because you all have stories that you want to tell. And then the next time you're like, "Oh, I don't feel like writing," then you're going to get yourself to prepare the story for that next writers group. And number 15, don't let the fear of the time it will take to accomplish something stand in the way of you doing it. Writing is a process. When we think big scale and we think, we start on our story, we're 40, 50 pages in, and we're like, wow, this can be like a 600-page story. When we start thinking too big, for some of us, that can be off putting. Think in smaller steps, solidify the journey, and focus on what's the next step. Of course, you want to have your goal, like that's so important as a writer. But if you take it in baby steps, you're going to make the journey so much easier on yourself. And number 16, storytelling resource, save the cat. I was like, I should have had the book pulled up over here. Save the cat. No, this is not a paid advertisement. It is just a great reference material. Now, Save the Cat is essentially considered a screenwriter's book. However, one of the reasons I love about it is the way that it dives into storytelling at heart. And I think it's absolutely a phenomenal read for any writer out there because it teaches you the different beats of storytelling. And then, like, you don't have to copy that same structure, but you can learn from it and then break it down into your own structure. The save the cat moment is that early moment in a story when a character does something stupid, something weird, something quirky, something that just happens, or maybe it happens to them that makes the reader, the audience feel for the character. And that is the save the cat moment. And number 17, every secret of a writer's soul, every experience of his life, every quality of his mind is written large in his works. We're getting a little, metaphorical here, of course, with Virginia Woolf. When we think about the stories we wanna tell, our stories are simply a collection of our experiences. So, the next time you're struggling to figure out, like, what story do you wanna tell next? Think of one of your favorite stories, one of your favorite memories. Start there. Tip number 18, make it easy. I tell new and intermediate writers this all the time. Make it easy. You don't have to write a novel to be accomplished. Sometimes it only takes half a page to tell an incredible story. In all the posts that I see on social media, a lot of the times you'll have some writers who'll be like, "Yeah, I've written, like, hundreds of thousands of words," and then other writers who've like, "Alright, I wrote a couple hundred words and like 10 pages." And they make it feel like that's a bad thing. But the fact that you started on your writing, the fact that you got to write, that is success. And the easier you make the process for yourself, the easier it's going to be more consistent. And tip number 19, you must write and read as if your very life depended on it. When you get into that story and you get into the heart of it, you know that feeling when you just, like, you have to write. The characters are coming to life on the page, and it just starts coming to life for you? That's that feeling. When you hit that moment in a story, you'll know that, like, that's the right story to tell. And number 20, my favorite three-word story, beginning, middle, end. There's probably a quote out of that somewhere, but I thought of that one myself, I promise. Alright, so that takes us to, let's see, we got the first tips number 1 through 20, so there's our tip counter. Writing tip count, 20 of 100. So, if you found any value out of these writing tips, tap that like button, tap the subscribe or the follow button if you're on Twitch or YouTube. That way you can join me in the journey. Plus, I do daily creative writing live streams, daily creative writing tips, shorts, videos, all the things to help you become a better writer. Because I want to help you tell the story that you want to tell in a way that is easy. Because when you're working a 40, 50, 60 hours a week with family, with responsibilities, it's hard. It's hard to sit down and write. Trust me, when I was doing 80-hour work weeks, like, the struggle was real. I'm going to help you by giving you tips and advice that's gonna help make it more bite-sized, so that way you can find success with your overall writing journey. Excellent, but that means we're going to take a pause from our writing tips because it's time to write now. That's gonna bring us to our first writing sprint, which means we're gonna need some good music. So I'm going to throw up the music. We're going to start with our first writing sprint. It'll be 20 minutes. We got 2 20-minute writing sprints on the clock, and let's see what we're feeling. Alright, emotional ambient. That's the vibe to perfect. So yep, I am alright. I was echoing for a moment. I was like, I had another screen open somewhere. So, if you're joining me on the live stream, if you feel like writing, of course, you're more than welcome to, but totally no pressure. I'm going to throw up my story, and you're more than welcome to read along, and I'll write for the both of us. Alright, let's go. Ooh, alright, I accidentally deleted my other screen. Bear with me. Let me pull my story up. There we go. Perfect. So I got the story up, we got the writing sprint, and we got our 20-minute timer. Now, if you're new to my live, here's the synopsis on the right of the last scarecrow, the story I'm working on. And yesterday I was going through some editing of a previous chapter. So we're going to see how it goes today. I'll blow up the screen a little bit more so that way you can see if you want to read along. All right. Let's see. I always have to go back like the last like paragraph or sometimes a page to make sure I actually know what's going on with my life with this story. All right. So he lifted his jacket pocket open just to ascertain that Pebble was inside. Was she sleeping? Her tiny body was covered in a material that looked to blend in so well with her skin, what with the shades of grays, blacks, and greens. Upon closer inspection, she clung to a toy of some sort in her hands. But as to what it was, he could not say. The fact that she could be asleep after the chaos that they had just fled from astounded him. What did the flowers call her again? A pixie? He wondered if it was the wings or her demeanor that made her such. He had only ever met various animals, beyond his creators, of course, and felt very unknowledgeable about other species. He wondered where she was going to go when she awoke. He let go of the pocket and let her sleep as he speculated what should come next. The last scarecrow looked up at the bright sun above, which would soon be covered by a group of clouds on the horizon. Normally, that meant rain was fast approaching, but in this part of the land, he was clueless. The grass near them no longer shined with the bright green warmth of summer's embrace, and already patches were graying and brown here and there as if fall would soon approach. How long had it been since he left New City? He pulled open his jacket and checked in within the inner side pocket, right where he had left Mr. Quilt. As a side note, Mr. Quilt is kind of like the magic carpet from Aladdin. But since he left the city, the quilt's basically become an inanimate object. However, he was told by the mentor character that he needs the quilt to locate the graveyard to stop the bad guy. Right where he had left Mr. Quilt, or what was left of him anyways, still just as lifeless a blanket as any other since departing New City. He found himself shaking his head worriedly. He had no idea how he was supposed to deal with a creature as evil as that monstrosity, the first demon. He had no clue how he was ever supposed to locate the graveyard of the last with Mr. Quilt in his current state, and he most certainly had no idea where they were currently standing. How was he supposed to do any of this when he was just a simple scarecrow who only knew the warmth of the sun's embrace and the calm serenity of a field? He might as well ask Mr. Crow to swim. And the time starts now. All right. And that brings us to the end of our writing sprint. What great work. I know that I feel like I actually made really good headway on the story that I was that on the last scarecrow. This I want to say a couple of days ago, I was stuck on this last chapter because it was a downtime chapter. Like the previous chapter was a lot of action. So I knew that I needed to further the plot through character development and touching upon the larger story, but I didn't know how to do it. I felt that I was kind of getting lost in the chapter when I was working on it. So this is my suggestion to you. If you're ever stuck in your story, stop what you're doing, move on to the next chapter, come back to it. That's always a great recommendation if you're ever feeling stuck. So that way you're not disrupting your creative process and you're still working on the story instead of letting one thing pull you out of the entire process. Whew. All right, excellent. I am feeling great about that. So that was writing sprint number 1. And thank you for hopping into the live stream. If you're checking this out, if you're watching this on the replay, thank you. We are doing 100 writing tips today as thanks for helping me hit 100 subscribers. So we're going to go over some more tips. We're going to do some more writing tips. I actually have some prompts I'm going to share with you. Now, this next section, it's going to be a mix of some writing prompts, some different style of writing tips. And then as we progress to the end, as we get a little closer to 100, like think I can do it, where we're going to do a little bit more of a deep dive into some elements of storytelling, like character, structure, world building, and so on and so forth. Let's see, Vaughn. Thanks for the. Oh yeah, of course. Anytime, my man. Always appreciate you. Whereas Vaughn always has some really great stories that he's working on. But yeah, absolutely. Anytime that you need help. Always love seeing writers' stories brought to life. Okay, so once again, if you have a writing tip or you have a writing idea and you think that it would help other writers out there, drop it in the comments below and help me reach 100. Okay, and we're going to get right along to writing tip number, let's see, we are on to writing tip number 21. We're going to get some prompts. So, writing tip number 21. And let me throw up my camera. Perfect. All right, writing tip number 21. So, writing prompt. You have to face off against a legendary creature or animal to survive. Which one is it? And what do you do? If I was working on this prompt, I would be facing off against the centaur, probably the centaur. And Jessica, if you're on right now, I totally blame you for thinking about the labyrinth from yesterday because now I want to do like a Greek mythological story with like the centaur. That's 100% what I would do with this writing prompt. Okay, so writing tip number 22, which is going to be our next writing prompt. You just found out that you won the lottery. However, so did your worst enemy. Whoever gets there first takes the money. And go. If you were to do this writing prompt, who would the worst enemy be? And like, what would the story be? I actually, I saw a Netflix story, or it was a Netflix movie recently with Bryan Cranston, and it was a great movie about them breaking the lottery. I'm like, wow, is that actually a thing? It's kind of like card counting. Is that actually a thing? Let's see. That sounds awesome. You should do it. Thank you. Thank you. Probably in one of my free writes. In my first 15 days of my writing challenge, I was doing only free writes until I just like got into the last scarecrow. And once I started on last scarecrow, I'm like full steam ahead until I finish this. That'll probably be queued up on my first writing prompt. Okay, and then writing prompt number 23. You are your favorite animal. How can you leverage the other senses? Hearing, smell, touch, taste, and seeing, the easy one that we always use. How can you leverage the other senses to describe how you have to get home to your family? This could be a real creature, something as easy as a bear, a jaguar, or it could be a mythological creature. Pro tip, if I was doing a mythological creature, I would definitely be doing a dragon. Dragons are my favorite. All right. And writing prompt number 24. You're trapped on a space station with an alien and any weapon of your choice. I'll let you do the math. Writing tip number 25. Writing prompt. You're about to meet your hero, but they turn out to be a complete. I'll let you do the math. I'll let you be the judge of that one. Sometimes our heroes are phenomenal individuals, and sometimes our heroes are well, that's always fun to imagine what could be or what couldn't be. Writing prompt, and this is going to be number 26. You just met your first true love. Oh, who doesn't want to meet their first true love? The next date will be marvelous, except it's time to tell them about ... If you were to write a character, what would be the worst thing that you think they would not want to tell their their love about? That would be some great, absolutely phenomenal dramatic tension right there. Thanks, love. Thanks for dropping by this stream. I appreciate the like. Thank you. And we're gonna go into number 27. Writing prompt. You're a detective chasing after a cold-blooded killer. You just found their hideout. Of course, your phone is dead because the phone always dies. But this may be your last chance to capture the bad guy. What do you do? Any horror thriller movie, they're definitely going full in and either winning or getting themselves killed. What would your character do differently? And that's going to bring us to writing number 28. Pick your favorite memory, your absolute favorite. The time that you had children, the time you climbed Mount Everest, the time you won that match, your first love. Think of your greatest story. Now, what if the worst possible thing happened? That's some real obstacles right there. Now, how would you tell that story and how would you do it differently? Writing prompt number 29. You need a certain over-the-counter medication to deal with ... When you get to the store, there's one left on the shelf, but you're not the only person who needs it and sees it. A race to the meds. Ooh, perfect obstacle right there. Who doesn't love a good race for the drug in your local Rite Aid or CVS? Oof, there's a story right there. And to round out the tail end of our writing prompts, you're trapped in a boat at sea. You have supplies and a radio to call for help. Unluckily for you, the worst storm is about to approach on the horizon. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a good situation for anyone. Granted, I've never been trapped on a boat, so I don't know what that would feel like. I don't have much boating experience, so this would be an interesting story, that's for sure. Now, we're going to go into tip number 31 and back into some writing tips for you. So did you just hit an obstacle with your story? Try outlining it and seeing what shakes loose. When you're feeling like you're getting stuck, pull yourself back, write down the 3, 5, or 10 main story beats, beginning, middle, end, and then fill out the beats that happen between the beginning and the middle and the end. And that will help you with getting to the next part of your story. If you're like, oh, what should I do next? And tip number 32, consistent 20-minute writing sprints 2 to 3 times a week will help you reach your goal. And I can actually share this from experience of, 50 days now of writing sprints. And my goal is just to practice consistency because I've spent so many years being inconsistent. And I try to put myself in the mindset of would this have been possible for me years ago when I was doing 40, 50, 60-hour a week jobs? Absolutely not. But I think the challenge and the goal is to do short sprints in times that work for you, right? And once again, make it as easy as possible. which will bring us to tip number 33. And before I hop into the tip, welcome to the live stream. If you're just hopping in, 100 tips for 100 subscribers. All right, tip number 33. What is your writing goal? Let that determine the pace and style of stories that you will tell. So, if your goal is to become a famous writer, or maybe your goal is to publish the next bestseller, or maybe your goal is just to write stories for yourself and your family, knowing what your goal is will help you develop and tailor the types of stories that you're working on. So you're aware of like, okay, maybe I need to start creating like an online presence, or maybe I just need to practice my writing bit by bit. Keep the goal in mind. All right. And tip number 34, put together a writer's portfolio and let your work shine. Do you have a bunch of stories that are just building up dust in the drawer, in the filing cabinet, on the computer? Why not put a bunch of them together, create an anthology, or start putting together your writer's portfolio? Because you'll never know when it's time to share your stuff with the world. Or let's say you want to become a published author. Putting together a portfolio will help show others the types of stories and the types of work that you're trying to tell. There's a reason that when you see many well known and reputable authors, writers, that they always stick to similar genres. They're always doing similar genres because they're building up an online portfolio of similar work. Writing tip number 35. Start an online journal. And this one, Vaughn, is a call out to you if you're out there, my man. I am impressed by the consistency at which you're able to journal online. Online journaling is an effective, and I mean an effective way of writing, even regardless of length, whether it's short, whether it's long, because it's an online space where you're able to track how often you're writing and when you're writing. And then you can go back and it makes it easy for you to track your progress. All right. And writing tip number 36. Do you want your work read? Try seeking another writer and offer to trade read throughs. Value through value is the way to go. And tip number 37, be your own writing boss by setting rewards and punishments for not reaching writing milestones. If nobody Nobody will be there to hold you accountable. Nobody will be there to reward you. Of course, unless you've already made a deal with a publishing house or you've made a deal with your audience, your readership, that it starts changing. But when you're still in the early or intermediate stages of developing your story, you're the only one who gets to set that for you. And once again, make the rewards, make the punishments, make them easy. Make them easy. If you already like to go out and go shopping, or if you already like to go out and buy things, or do something, or watch something, use that as the easy reward for writing. Because you know you want to write. It's just when you get to it, like you're tired. I get it. The struggle's real. Okay, and tip number 38, resource. Speaking of habits, one of the most phenomenal books I have ever read in my entire life. Atomic Habits. Read it, like life changing. Like, seriously, Atomic Habits is a life changing book because habits are what make up our entire life, our day to day, our long term. By understanding the way that habits work and restructuring the way that you look at how you build habits, it will change your life. I think building up writing habits is so important, and this book will seriously help you. So if you're looking for a change, Atomic Habits, recommend. And tip number 39, make so many writing mistakes. Make all the writing mistakes. Don't be afraid to make writing mistakes. But for every 10 mistakes, go Google something new about writing that you didn't already know. So the goal is that with mistakes, you want to learn. Now, what we do learn from our own mistakes, you want to elevate that to the next level. So let's say you read through your story and you're like, all right, this story is littered with character discrepancies, dialogue mistakes, and problems with different storytelling aspects. Now I'm going to go Google what is one way that I could develop a more effective character. There you go. And there's the solution. All right. And tip number 40, writing is rewriting. We all love to hate that quote because to get your story from rough draft to final draft, you are going to be doing a lot of rewriting. Usually, what your rough draft compared to your final draft looks like can sometimes be completely different looks, aspects, feels, and stories because so much of your time you're going to spend rewriting what you originally wrote to fine tune the characters, the world, and the dialogue. All right, and now let's we got some. We're gonna pull a little help again from some famous, well-known writers to get us to tip number 41: write drunk, edit sober. I had to throw in a Hemingway one. When 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 you're in the creation process, you want to be in whatever creative mindset works for you. Do the things that work for you, whether that's music, whether for Hemingway that was alcohol, for maybe it's the environment, because it's you want to elevate the creative process. But when you edit it, editing is going to take a more technical side of you because now you're having to dig into storytelling elements. Great quote. All right. And number 42, if there's a book you really want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it. This goes into what is the story that you want to tell? Or what if you're like, this would be a great story idea, but it's never been done before. Like, this is the thing. Tell the stories in your heart, as corny as that sounds. All right. And tip number 43, write. Finish things. Learn to write better. Accept criticism gracefully. Then put your work out there. Great one by Neil Gaiman. He talks about the writing process. You just want to write and go through the process. Enjoy the journey. Enjoy the aspect and the focus of just writing and doing the things. And tip number 44, almost all good writing begins with terrible, and I mean terrible, first efforts. You need to start somewhere, and that's the truth. Don't be worried that your first story might be a pile of garbage. That's all right. You just want to put your writing out there and get started with it. You will have so much fun. Do it. And tip number 45, you fail only if you stop writing. That's a great Ray Bradbury quote. And I completely agree because if you are not writing, then it could be seen as failing. However, if you also want to be kind to yourself and be clear with your lifestyle, I look at this in the sense of like, okay, I haven't written in like a year. All right, then well, let's challenge that a little bit. All right, and then let's go. Tip number 46. If I waited for perfection, I would never write a word. Miss Margaret Atwood. That is absolutely a great quote because the perfectionist inside us wants to refine the story and tell the perfect character and the perfect dialogue. But if we're too much of a perfectionist, we never create the things we need to create. Get it out onto paper and go back and edit. You have time, I promise you. And tip number 47, sometimes you have to get your writing done in spare moments here and there. J.K. Rowling. Absolutely. And I think this speaks to any individual who leads a very busy life. You have to find time to write when you're juggling responsibility. Absolutely great quote. And tip number 48, writing is like driving at night in the fog. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way. I absolutely love this quote because in the development process, you're building characters, you're building a world, and you're building dialogue that you sometimes you don't know what the long term looks like. And especially if you're like, okay, this is going to be like a 1-part book, it's be like a 3-part, a 10-part. Well, you might not know what the long term looks like. The goal is just like enjoy the creative vision. You're on the journey and you're writing sentence by sentence, paragraph, chapter, and you will get there. Have fun with it because eventually you'll go through the fog, and you will get to the end of your story. And tip number 49, I would advise anyone who aspires to a writing career that before developing his talent, he would be wise to develop a thick hide. Ooh, that's a good one because once you put your writing out there, you're going to get criticism, you're going to get critique, you're going to get people who are going to love your story, you're going to get people who might hate your story. So, do you have the capability to be able to have somebody read your work and tell you that there's so many problems with it, but take it in a way that's constructive? That is the challenge right there with being a thick hide. Now, I personally believe you can give any feedback, any critique, any advice in a way that's kind. That just takes time and patience. And tip number 550, abandon the idea that you are ever going to finish. Lose track of the 400 pages and write just one page for each day. It helps. John Steinbeck, great quote right there. One page is 300 words. And how long would it take you to do 300 words? 15, 20, 30 minutes? Absolutely phenomenal. If you're working on a book and you're writing a little every day, and of course, like if you can get that into your lifestyle, great. Sometimes you're at places in your life where that's just not realistic, right? But assuming that you can balance it in a way that doesn't make you feel overwhelmed, do that. Absolutely. All right. And that brings us to tip 50. Tip 50. Oh, I feel so accomplished. Okay. So let's see. Writing tip count 50 of 100. Woo. All right. I gotta I gotta take a drink real fast. I'm recovering. If you found any value in any of these writing tips or the writing sprint so far, tap that like button and follow or subscribe. Creative writing stuff, advice, tips, things to help you become a better writer. All right, and we're actually going to pause from our tips and go into writing sprint number 2. All right, and let me pause this. All right, got to make sure that I got all the writing stuff. So let's see what we got here. I know you're talking about that was the Hemingway quote, right? You're like, what would be the thing? What's like the thing that I need while I'm like enjoying the writing process? Wine. I was like, yeah, that could work. I was like, there's definitely like there's been times where like I've been completely sober. There's times where I've written under the influence of like drinking, and two completely different writing experiences for me. Everybody knows what works for them. It's like, know what works for you. Sometimes it helps you tell different stories, and I think that can be the fun part of it. Oh, I wish I was back. There you go. It's all in the mind. You can be the next Bacchus. Oh, that's awesome, man. All right. And I'll give this shout out. So if you're just hopping into the stream right now, we're just going through 100 writing tips. And if you have a writing tip that you're like, this might help other creative writers out there, or maybe this is something that's worked for you, drop it in the comments below, drop it and share. We're going to hop into our second writing sprint right now. And let's see. So we're going to drop that, and writing sprint number 2. So we're going to throw this up. We're going to get back our music up. Once again, feel free to join me in getting some writing done, or you can read along with me because I am having fun with The Last Scarecrow. And we're going to throw up a different type of music. We're going to do a little bit more metal. All right. Give my vocal cords a break for a second. All right. So we're going to get our second writing sprint. Let's reset the timer. Okay. In writing sprint number 2, 20 minutes and go. Just wanted to say welcome, Sarah. Thanks for the like. Appreciate you. Nice. Okay. All right. I was feeling great about that. So, oh man. All right. So that was a really good writing sprint. I know I pushed that writing sprint just a little bit, but I realized I was in one of those chapters where I was at like the very end of it. And I had to get through that last section. You know, that moment when you're like, all right, you're on a good pace, but like I needed to get to the end of it. I know part of me was, in terms of like the dialogue, some dialogue and description was a little choppy. I was literally just trying to like get out that end, but I'm like so glad because I knew what needed to happen. I knew what needed to be said, and we made it to the end of that chapter. That chapter was hard. There was only one other chapter that I've struggled with so far, and I think it was the last time that I had like a downtime moment around page 30. So pages 30 and 95 are my the struggle bus moments. All right, so let's pull myself back up and see where we are at. I hope you were able to get some writing done, or you were able to join along and hopefully be entertained by our newfound trio, the Scarecrow. It was like the setup for a joke. A scarecrow, a crow, and a pixie walk into a gathering. And let me tell you, they are not the only ones who will be going on this journey. We'll just stay tuned for the action of the tribe of the first tricksters tomorrow. All right. So let's get back into our tips. So once again, let me throw up this tracker. So do you have a writing tip that you think would help other creative writers? Drop it in the comments below. I would love to share it. So I'm going to throw back up my camera. So we are at about 50 of 100. I'm going to speed through these next ones. We're going to be refining these next tips. So they're going to be touching more on elements of character development, world building, dialogue structure, and all the things to help you become a better writer. Okay. So I got the audio, and let's see. I'm just seeing your comment. Vaughn, storms in my area, so I couldn't continue on the Facebook feed. Oh, that sucks that it's storming out there. I hope you're staying safe over there, man. All right, and got this perfect. Got the camera set up. Let's get to tip number. All right. Tip number 51. Creating your first character, model it after a friend, family member, or a hero. So with character development, think about somebody who stands out to you and write down some of their strengths, their weaknesses, maybe a couple of traits that just really stuck with you. Now use that for the model for your next character. Tip number 52. A character is defined by the kinds of challenges he cannot walk away from. Arthur Miller. The obstacles is what define and develop the characters. If a character doesn't have and they don't face strong conflict, strong things that literally force them to grow, how are they going to become that person, that thing that reaches the end of the story? Great quote. And number 53, stuck in the middle of your story, create a supporting character, but have all of their actions make it unintentionally worse for your protagonist. If you're ever if you're ever stuck, sometimes just creating a new character can really shake up the plot and the part that you're at. Now, maybe they don't have to be like a fully fleshed out character yet, but use them to help develop your hero's journey and make it help mix things up a little bit. That's something that's actually worked out well for me. Something I've employed a couple times in the last Scarecrow. All right. And tip number 54, when writing a novel, a writer should create living people, not characters. A character is a caricature. Ernest Hemingway, another Hemingway quote. So that's a very good thing, because when we're writing characters, when you're watching TV, movies, books, you resonate with characters that you connect with. You resonate with people. If for things where the characters don't work or if they don't feel like they resonate with you, either they're just not meant, you're not the intended audience, or enough of their traits, strengths, weaknesses, quirks haven't been developed enough so they don't feel believable. And that's what that quote means. You need to create believable people for your readership and audience to really connect with. And number 55, use a character profile when developing your first character for the very first time. What is a character profile? It's a background, it's a bio. I like to call the character profile. Essentially, you want to write down on a list what are the beliefs? What is the things they hate, the things they love, who's their family? Think about it like this. If you were going to go for a passport or you were going to go for some sort of identification, what are the things that would be asked of you that they would have to know? If you were to enter into a class, what sorts of things would be asked of you that others would need to know about? Answered those things. And tip number 56, good character is not formed in a week or a month. It is created little by little, day by day. Heraclitus. I was like, hopefully I pronounced that right. So character development takes time. You're not going to come up with your Darth Vader, your I was like, you're Catwoman. I don't know why I blinked. You're Harley Quinn. You're Luke Skywalker overnight. It takes time, it takes refining, and it takes building up the perfect characters that we want to create. Tip number 57, don't create a love interest for your character. Develop an independent friend who could potentially be a love interest in the next story. So, a problem that a lot of new writers and a lot of storytellers, especially scripts on television shows, make is that they introduce characters. We introduce characters as a result of trying to create some sort of love triangle, love obstacle, love thing, instead of creating a fully defined secondary character that your protagonist can interact with. There's a difference between creating a love interest and then creating a character that your protagonist could form a connection with. And that all comes down to the details because your intention with when building their background will distinguish it. All right. And tip number 58, it's not enough to have a great hero or heroine. Your characters have to have inner lives that make sense. Your readers should be able to see the world through their eyes. That comes down to having a believable character. You know what it feels like when you feel so much for a character and then they get killed off. And if you truly feel it inside, it's because you were able to relate with them and see their perception of the world. Tip number 59, give your character a quirk that you've never seen before and one that nobody would want. It'll make them even more likable, I promise. So, if you're struggling to make your character feel like either they're believable or maybe that they're likable, just do some random quirk. Think of something that's quirky about like one of your friends or something that's quirky about like one of your heroes, right? Let's see, a character who stutters all the time. Easy, that's like an easy quirk, easy example, right? While it might seem like a huge obstacle for them, we connect with and we relate with underdogs. We relate with people who have some type of obstacle, some type of thing within themselves that they have to overcome. Quirks, and then when it's presented in a way where it could be times it comes across comedic, times it comes across dramatic, then we're more likely to connect and relate with the character. All right. And tip number 60, a truly great character is not defined by their circumstances, but by the choices they make in the face of them. That is a great quote, Brandon Sanderson. So that's really a result of obstacles and how our characters deal with and grow and come to life as a result of obstacles. If your character is faced with being trapped inside a basement and having to escape from the serial killer, are they the type of person who's comes up with something clever to break through the wall or find some sort of connection? Or dig their way out, or are they the type of character who they're going to find some way to call for help? The way that your character overcomes the obstacle is going to determine how your character grows. And that's what's going to make them a more interesting and well-rounded character, especially when you can call back to prior moments of the story that connect. The coolest thing is when you're reading like 200 pages in and there's a reference from page 5 or 10 and you're like, wow, that's cool, because that's what gets us to buy into the character even more so and fall in love with them. All right, and let's see. Storms or loves the forest. Yeah, I was like, let's see, where was I giving of interest? Yeah, that's actually, yeah. So that would actually, I think you're talking about quirks. So you could really give them a really interesting perspective, a love or something that really defines them, right? So somebody who like loves the forest, how would that shape their view and their perception of animals, of nature, of agriculture? That's going to be way different than somebody who hates the forest. Absolutely great, great idea, Vaughn. Thank you for sharing that. And we are, let's see, where are we at? We are on to tip 61. Ooh. All right. Ooh. Trying to see if I can make it here. All right, my vocal cords. I got it. All right, 61. Struggling trying to come up with believable dialogue. Go sit in a coffee shop and listen in on real conversations. Yes, be that be that creeper. Listen in on real dialogue. Now, the reason being is when you hear real conversations, it gives you an idea for the type of dialogue that you could write in your story. Sometimes if you have written down chunks of real dialogue, then that gives you really good practice, and then you can adjust to make it fit your story and your world. Let's see. Jessica, great live. Bummed I got to miss the end again. I appreciate you. We've been going live for 1:48. All right. I think I can get this in under 2 hours. Thanks for dropping by, Jessica. I appreciate you. Oh, thank you. And all right. So let's go 62. Dialogue is not just quotation, it is grimaces, pauses, adjustments of blouse buttons, doodles on a napkin, and crossings of legs. They're really talking about the subtext. Jerome Stern is talking about the subtext of dialogue, of the subtext of body language, and how our body language, when combined with effective dialogue, can speak volumes about a character than just saying it. It's a perfect example of show, don't tell. Sure, your character could say, I am so uncomfortable in this moment, or they could say, yeah, that's nice, as they fidget with their phone worriedly. Tip number 63. Go to your text threads, scroll down, and pick one conversation at random. Choose about 5 to 10 texts. Now, use these text messages to start your next piece of dialogue. This is a great exercise if you're really trying to practice, improve, and fine tune dialogue as a whole. Great exercise. And tip number 64. Dialogue is the lifeblood of fiction. Characters' words breathe life into the page and set the tone for your story. Rachel Aaron. And tip number 65. Learn one new word a day. A larger vocabulary will lead to more complex dialogue and storytelling. Even if it's like that's I think it's helpful with even just one word, because then when you're working on your next story and you're trying to tell like that next narrative, or you're trying to talk about a different character, it'll come to you and it'll help you tell something new. Tip number 66. Good dialogue illuminates what people are not saying. Robert Town, once again, speaking to our subtext, because subtext is so important in dialogue. Something you want to ask yourself is, what is your dialogue not saying? Excellent tip. And tip number 67. During your second draft, reread your character's dialogue aloud. Does it sound like something a normal human being would say? And tip number 68. Dialogue should convey a sense of spontaneity and authenticity, as if the characters are speaking directly to the reader. And tip number 69, pick a scene from your favorite movie or TV show. Why does this dialogue in that scene work? If you're stuck on a scene about a farmer who is trying to maintain his fields, wouldn't it be amazing to go check out a movie or check out a book about a farmer in a similar circumstance? Check out things that work, don't copy, but check it out for research and then do your own thing. Avatar is a great example of retelling a classic Pocahontas story. All right, tip number 70. Dialogue is the art of negotiating meaning between characters, revealing their thoughts, emotions, and desires. Kazuo Ishiguro. Because dialogue shows us what we feel, what we think, what we're not thinking, and when done in an effective way, can really develop the character. All right, so that rounds us right now out at 70 tips. And let's see where we're at. All right, so let's keep going. We're going to go straight on to tip number 71. The plot of your story will make or break the reading experience. Can you summarize your story in a couple sentences? If you're struggling with the meaning of your story and you don't know what to do, you can't tell it succinctly, summarize it. What is your story in 2 sentences? Plus, it'll make it easier when you're trying to pitch your story to others, especially if you want to get it published. And tip number 72, plot is people. Human emotions and desires founded on the realities of life, working at cross purposes, getting hotter and fiercer as they strike against each other. Plot is a result of life. That's an absolutely 100% great quote. If you're not conveying story, if you're not conveying emotion, if you're not conveying the things that we feel or your experiences, how are you going to create believable plots for your characters? And tip number 73, do the major obstacles your characters face feel like the most extreme thing that could happen to them? Yes or no? So when you're developing obstacles, you really want to push your characters to the limit. If your character is put up against a wall, are they facing the worst wall ever designed in the history of existence, or is it just a wall? Push to extremes, because extremes push characters to grow. And tip number 74, the most exciting part of storytelling is that you make a choice and the story tells you what comes next. Tip number 75, does the climax of your story feel rewarding? Have have a friend read only the climax and ask them, how do they feel? If you're trying to develop that last section of your story, getting feedback on the climax, because that's going to be the highest emotional arc of your entire narrative, is going to be so important. All right. And that, let's see. So that puts us at 75. Let me just throw this up here. 75 of 100. I am almost there at 154. Oof, an hour and 54. We're pushing 2 hours. All right, let's do it. All right, can I do this? We're gonna keep going. All right, we're gonna do some speed tips for you. All right. So tip number 76. A good plot should have a definite beginning, middle, and end with a twist at each point. Tip number 77, read the first and the last page of your story. Does the character feel like a completely new version of themselves? Their beginning should be a complete opposing reflection to show the overall journey that they went in. Tip number 78, the difference between fiction and reality. Fiction has to make sense, Tom Clancy. When developing your fiction fantasy world, the rules have to make more sense because you're bringing people into your world and they have to understand the mechanics. Tip number 79. Does the antagonist do things to your hero that challenge them to grow? How so? You want to really challenge how your antagonist is going to push your hero to grow. So important. And tip number 80, plot is the only thing that keeps me reading to the end. Hey, true that. If we're not engaged in a compelling plot, why are we going to stick around to get to the ending? Tip number 81, pick one of the popular story structures when developing your next story. I love working from the 3-act storytelling model. That's just something that I've always appreciated, but there's many different story structures out there. There's you could do a 5-act storytelling structure. There's like the only two that come to mind. I want to say there's about 6 or 7 predominant ones. But if you want to know more about story structures, I'd be happy to make a video. Throw the request down in the comments down below. All right. And tip number 82, the best stories are driven by structure. Without it, they would be like houses without foundations. If your story is not structured, whether that's using chapters, if the paragraphs aren't well put together, if there's not a clear journey between what the beginning, the middle, and the end is, it's going to feel disjointed. Structure is very important when formatting your stories. Tip number 83, pick your last story. Now break it down into 5 to 10 beats from beginning to end. Do the beats have a clear path? Use that same method the next time you're feeling stuck. And tip number 84, structure is the tool that allows you to take your readers on a journey through your story. Don't forget structure. And tip number 85, does your story lack structure? Make a bullet point list of the major things that happen to your protagonist. For them to get to the end, what are you missing? Tip number 86, structure is the architecture of story. It gives shape to the chaos of imagination. Our imagination can run rampant sometimes, but if we're not structuring it, our thoughts onto the page in a way that's clear and concise, the reader, the viewer will easily get lost. And I'm sure you've seen that movie or TV show that just doesn't make sense. On page, it might have made sense to the writer, but in the final result, it needed to be better structured. And tip number 87, does each paragraph in your story have a clear beginning, middle, and an end? And tip number 88, a well-structured story is like a well-built house. It's solid, it's sturdy, and it stands the test of time. And tip number 89, practice building a story with a friend. Start with a bullet point list and go back and forth, writing out each beat from scratch. This is a great method if you're feel like you're not that good at story development or at structuring your stories, but then when you're doing like a collaboration, you can kind of treat this like a game to really help refine each other's process. And tip number 90, a good story is like a puzzle. Structure is the key to putting all the pieces together. George R.R. Martin, he would know what putting a puzzle is like together for our Game of Thrones series. It's a well-structured story when you can call back to all the different pieces that led you to the end and kept you engaged. All right, we're in the home stretch now. Let's do it. And tip number 91, when creating your next world, do research on one historical society. Tip number 92, world building is about creating a sense of place, a world that feels real and lived in. Ursula K. Le Guin. And tip number 93, if you could map out your world, what are the major points of interest? And most importantly, how will they affect your protagonist's journey? Tip number 94, world building is about asking questions. What is the geography of this world? What are its customs and traditions? What is its history? If you're not familiar with the layout of the world you're trying to build, how are you going to get your readers to buy in to whatever journey your characters are trying to take? And tip number 95, World Building 101. What are the beliefs, social hierarchy, and economic feel of each area? It would be the same thing as if you went to a city like in California, a city on New York, the East Coast, into a town outside of the United States, each city has its own feel. So ask yourself, what are the elements that go into describing that? And tip number 96, the key to good world building is consistency. The rules of your world must be clear and followable. If you're not consistent in developing the different elements of your world, it's going to be confusing to the readers. And tip number 97, when creating a new world, don't be afraid to try new things, but test them against believable cities or backdrops. You can do something completely different for the city world that you're trying to create, but when after you have the ideas drawn out, look back to different cities that might have been similar in history and see why they did or didn't collapse. And tip number 98, world building is about creating a world that feels alive with its own myths, legends, and histories. What myths exist in your world? What legends are its inhabitants afraid to say, love talking about, and so on and so forth? And tip number 99, pinpoint your favorite world that you've experienced and determine what key elements contributed to making you feel that way. You want to remember what made you feel great about that world and then create that same emotional experience in the story you're trying to tell. And at last, tip number 100, write easy, write consistently, and write now. And that, my friends, is 100 tips. 100 tips to help you become a better writer. Let me repeat, 100 tips to help you become a better writer. Thank you for subscribing to my channel. Thank you, all 100 of you who've joined me on this journey so far. As we now embark on the next section of our journey to 500 subscribers, and we'll see what it takes as we get there. If you found any value out of the tips, the writing sprints, don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe to this stream and or the replay. And I got new writing stuff for you each and every day. Whew. All right, I made it. We made it through our writing sprint. If you're checking this out, I will next be on tomorrow. Let me pull up the banner. Where did it go? Perfect. So if you're checking this out, this is my schedule for this week. I'll be up Monday through Friday. Oh, no, that's wrong screen. So I'll be up Monday through Friday. There we go. Perfect. So that way you'll be able to see Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time this week, and 2 p.m. on Saturday, Sunday. Thank you for joining me on this journey today. It has been fun. It's been real. And we have got 100 pieces of tips and information to help you become a better writer. Now, I'm ready to give my voice a break. So I'm Kauffman, and I will catch you on the morrow. And boom.